It's never easy to confront yourself with the truths that you might not be ready to accept. But being honest and being open and saying or writing things down is the first step to accepting and maybe changing.
This is Running for Real, the podcast for runners who know that for every runner's high, there are just as many lows. All those just missed PRs, easy runs that feel hard, injury blues, and more. Each week, we'll talk to running, health, and wellness experts about their highs, lows, and best advice to build our confidence. Running for Real is about being honest, being brave, and most of all, not feeling alone. And now here's our host, Tina Muir.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Running for Real podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. If this is your first time listening, welcome to the show. I hope you enjoy it and you continue to listen, you subscribe and you join us for future episodes. If you are a loyal listener, thank you so much for coming back and for being a loyal listener. I really appreciate you and all you have done. All right. So last week we had Shayna Burnett on the show who just manages to rock so many jobs. She's in charge of PR for Ultra. She has her own business. She is Cara Goucher's agent. She has 3 kids. There's so many things I could talk about with her, but we got to kind of learn her behind the scenes, what it's like being Cara's agent, the things that she has been working on over the past few years and why she thinks it's so important that we move things along with women's rights, particularly in the running world. So I hope you enjoyed that episode last week. And today I am really excited to introduce you to someone who has a podcast that is kind of similar to mine in some ways, but it's not so much focused on just running, although she is a runner. It is also focused on the health and wellness world in general, and she has some pretty impressive guests. When you hear her lineup of who she has had on her show, you are really going to be blown away by some of the guests she's had. I am excited to have Emily Abbate on the show. Emily has been a friend of mine since we both did the Generation You Can live event at Boston. Or was it New York? It was New York in November last year. And we really enjoyed kind of sharing the stage together along with Carrie Tollefson and Angie Spencer. And from there, I knew I wanted to have her on the show just because she has this like infectious, enthusiastic attitude towards life. And she also is vulnerable. Like she doesn't mind sharing things that she's struggling with and continues to work through, but she also is kind of a ray of light. So I really think you're going to enjoy getting to know Emily today. I just want to let you know quickly that you can find links to everything we talk about today in the show notes at tinamuir.com/episode 187. You will be able to find links to anything we mention in there. You can also go enter the Ultra giveaway there. You can also go support my sponsors in there. And there's plenty of other things for you to go look at. So let's go meet Emily. Thank you to Tracksmith for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast. Now, Tracksmith, as you probably know by now, if you've been listening to my podcast for a while, is a Boston-based brand led by a group of runners who are committed to making classically stylish, cutting-edge apparel. And I say that, and I have loved hearing how much you guys have been enjoying it as you've been going out there, getting some stuff of your own, or maybe you had some before and you are just raving about it, raving about the fact that, as I said a few weeks ago, you can actually wear these clothes multiple days in a row. Yes, even if you sweat quite a bit, and they don't stink. I've been really impressed with that. And I'm looking forward to testing it out in the real heat of summer to see how it gets on during those intense summer days where we are not sweating just a little bit, but just a lot. The goal of Tracksmith is simple. They want to craft the most considered products on the market for runners dedicated to the personal pursuit of excellence. When I say the personal pursuit of excellence, that doesn't mean just elites or just Boston qualifiers or people that are at high end. It also includes everyone. They're talking about everyone who is striving to be their best. And virtual races and all the stuff that's going on right now while we don't have physical in-person races are really showing this dedication that people have. The fact that you guys are going out there every day, you're challenging yourselves, but not because you have a race in mind that you don't want to, embarrass yourself or you don't want to not do what you're supposed to be doing, but because you want to do it for you. And that is amazing. It inspires me and it inspires Tracksmith too. They love anyone who is just trying their best. The word amateur comes from the Latin for lover. And Tracksmith calls athletes amateurs for that reason. So we're all amateurs. We all love our sport. And this love reveals itself in special ways. In those early morning sessions that you're squeezing in before your kids get up, on the weekends, finding a time to squeeze in a long run when you've got plenty of things that you need to be doing, and trying to give other people in your life the space and the freedom that they need. Or it's getting out there when you are living in an apartment on your own and no one is telling you to go out there. I'm really inspired, and so is Tracksmith, by all that you are doing. Now, for me, there's plenty of products that I'm loving right now, but I'm really enjoying the session shorts. These were crafted to craft a fast-feeling, lightweight knit short that could handle plenty of those repeat wears I mentioned. They don't come too long. They're not too short at 3.25 inches inseam. These shorts feature an exposed elastic waistband that sits nice and snugly at your waist, especially my pregnant waist as I'm recording this right now. The inner liner features a raw hem that you can barely feel. There's a zip pocket on the right hip to store your keys, your credit cards, or your fuel. And these are just some shorts that I'm really enjoying. They are UV protective, breathable, and highly moisture wicking. Now, if you have not purchased something from Tracksmith before, you can get 15% off your first order by using code TINA when you visit tracksmith.com/Tina Muir. That's tracksmith.com/Tina Muir. Or you can reverse it and go to tinamuir.com/tracksmith to go check out the items that I have been loving the most. You can go directly through to those items on the Tracksmith website. So that's tinamuir.com/tracksmith. Go check it out. You won't regret it. Emily, thank you so much for joining me today on the Running For Real podcast. I am looking forward to my listeners getting to know you and love you if they do not already. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is going to be fun. And I don't know what percentage of my audience would have heard of you before, because I feel like most of my audience kind of very much tend to stay in the running lane. And I don't know if they would have found a way to find access to you unless they came to our live show that we did with Generation UCAN in New York, which is where I met you in person and just fell in love with you and wanted to bring you on the show. And we've been talking about this for, well, when did we do that show? November, right?
Yeah, marathon.
So quite a long time. And we finally are pulling it through right now, although I'm bummed that we're not doing it in person like we originally planned. But host of the Hurdle podcast, formerly the fitness editor at Self magazine. So tell us in your own words, if you were to describe yourself to someone who had never heard of you before, what would you describe yourself as?
I am a journalist. I'm a freelance journalist. I write everywhere from GQ to Women's Health, Shape, Self, Men's Health, the whole gamut. And when I'm not tapping words to laptop for those publications, I am working on Hurdle. As you mentioned, Hurdle is a podcast that started at the very end of 2017. And it is a show where I talk to everyone from aspiring entrepreneurs to elite athletes about how they have managed some of their highest highs and their toughest moments. And it brings me the most joy.
Yeah, I obviously understand the joy that it can bring you with the same thing that I have here. And I would say to people listening, it's a very similar kind of thing that Emily is determined to kind of show us, the rest of the world, that these people that you might look up to and see as these kind of towering figures who everything is just fallen into place for. You'll kind of hear the stories behind them. And, you know, the whole thing behind Hurdle is that they've overcome a hurdle, some kind of massive barrier in their life. And it just makes these people seem more real and relatable. And I think if you like this podcast, you will certainly like it. And we are recording this a bit ahead of time. My audience knows by the time this comes out, actually, this is the first one that will be after my deadline of maternity leave. So,
oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I will be on maternity leave. Hopefully, well, I don't know. The baby could have come weeks before this. Who knows? But as of today that we are recording, today is a very special day for you because your 100th episode comes out. So congratulations to that. I know that's a big deal.
Thank you so much.
Tell us about some of the highlights, some of the people that you've had on. Maybe you could give some who were absolutely like, wow, I'm actually recording with this person. And then maybe some who maybe you didn't expect too much from, but were some of your favorites for other reasons.
For sure. I feel like I am kind of in awe every single time I sit down with a guest on the show. I'm sure you can relate.
Yeah.
You did mention episode 100. That's Molly Seidel. I'm so happy that we got to sit down together after her big day in Atlanta and prepping now for Tokyo, whenever that may be.
Yeah.
And then otherwise, I mean, the guest list, it makes my head spin. I feel so fortunate to have had the opportunity to have so many amazing conversations from everyone, including Wendy Yang, the president of Hoka, Andy Puddicombe, the co-founder and voice of Headspace, Robin Arzon from Peloton, Knox Robinson. He's a runner and a writer, otherwise known as First Run on Instagram. I had a really touching conversation with Dorothy Beale in a hotel room in New York City. God, I mean, the list goes on. Catherine David's daughter, two-time fittest woman on earth. Tia Claire Toomey, the fittest woman on earth. Harley Pasternak, a nutrition expert and celebrity trainer. I mean, the breadth of guests that I've had really does show that my interests in the health and wellness space are vast. And I really do feel like every single person has not only hurdles that they've overcome, but lessons that they can teach everyone.
I absolutely love that. And that's one of my favorite things about your show is that it is actionable and it is giving you, it's not just, there's so many podcasts out there that are just, you know, wow, that person's so inspiring. But then a week later, you know, that inspiration is gone. But you, like me, are kind of on a quest to show people that, hey, this applies to you and you can take what they're saying and use it in your own life to go get some things that you want to go achieve. I actually saw a tweet from, I'm going to hack this, I should have written it down, but Marie Forleo, do you know who that is?
I don't.
Oh, I'm surprised you don't know who she is. She's not a fitness person, but she is an entrepreneur. She's, I don't know, millionaire or maybe even a billionaire at this point. And she's, you know, good friends with Oprah. She's really up there with kind of what she's achieved, very much a kind of self-help, you can do this kind of person. But she put up a message today and it said, how can you make this the greatest thing that ever happened to you? Or something like that. And I thought, wow, that's really, you know, spinning it on its head, because right now as we're recording this and most likely when this comes out, we're still going to be in a state where it's very easy to see things as everything is going wrong. Nothing's ever going to come out of this. And obviously we know there's going to be a lot of bad out of this, but you can also make it something that you turn into something for you in your life. So I love that you do that within your podcast. And they're really, really enjoyable for anyone listening. Do you ever get yourself where you're meeting these people and you feel nervous or you feel kind of stressed about the call just because these are people that maybe you've looked up to for a long time?
For sure. I mean, I'll never forget walking in to Jillian Michaels' home. Yeah. She welcomed me into her home and I was sitting there just with the waves crashing behind me on the Los Angeles coastline and just thinking to myself, how did this even happen? I remember sitting in a small recording studio with Andy Puddicombe and my mind was just blown because I listened to him literally every day in my Headspace app. And there we were just sitting there together having a conversation about his background. I feel just so honored literally every time I sit down with someone because I'm just so grateful for their time, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you hope the kind of goal, do you have like an end goal with the podcast? What do you hope it becomes at episode 200? What do you want to look back and see then?
I mean, I definitely want to keep having these important conversations with people that I admire and people that have these hurdles that are just so impactful. But beyond the podcast, I mean, I would really love to get to a point where we're doing in-person workshops and some, you know, self-development kind of stuff. It's definitely something that I've been exploring more throughout the last year and have some, you know, pending partnerships on deck on how to explore that. And so I'm really looking to just continue to connect not only virtually with my audience, but definitely in person to figure out how we can continue to move with intention, not just physically, but also, you know, coming from personally and professionally.
I love that. And I'm right there with you. That sounds wonderful to me. And I would love to attend something like that and actually honestly put something on like that myself at some time in the future. But I will definitely make the effort to be at one of your events sometime when that does happen.
Thanks, Tina.
So, you know, we can talk about other people having these hurdle moments and right now, as I've mentioned, we are all in a bit of a hurdle moment ourselves. You actually, as I said, we're recording this ahead of time, but you talked recently about how you had your own, massive hurdle moment in that you had this plan for kind of how the next few months were going to unfold. You had these 5 podcasts that were in person planned, some of the biggest guests you've ever had, maybe trumping all those people you mentioned just before, but you had 5 of these episodes scheduled. 4 of them did not happen. That's crushing for anyone. Like to have these set up, to know that they're almost there within your grasp, and then they're kind of gone all of a sudden. And we all have things that we've been planning and wanting to do, but now are unable to do. But how are you you being in this hurdle moment right now? How are you taking the things you've learned, and how are you working through this?
Yeah, I think one of the most impactful things that someone said to me recently was that we have to distinguish the difference between what is fact and what is a feeling. And so, for example, instead of saying, I am overwhelmed and making that a concrete statement, saying something like, I feel overwhelmed. I was literally taking a class this morning, V class, it's actually called. And the instructor said something like, you have the opportunity to ask yourself, why isn't this different? And instead of getting mad about it, you have a choice, right? You can either let that thought overwhelm you, or you can make a shift. And so right now I am consciously choosing to make a shift and get comfortable with the uncomfortable, because really there's going to be a whole lot of that coming up in the weeks and the months to come. Yeah, it was definitely a difficult, circumstance to go through, the excitement and the highs of booking all of these really big guests, and then the lows of understanding that I had to put it off. Who knows if the interviews will come back around? I hope they will. I know a few of them are willing to do them remotely and a few of them aren't. So we'll just do the best we can with what we have and continue forward, because at the end of the day, this is something that my dad tells me all of the time. It's that even if you have good people, if the content that they're offering isn't good quality in terms of like what they have to say, it doesn't matter. If you have someone that has good quality things to say and they're impactful, even if the quality isn't up there and 100%, all that matters is the messages that they're bringing to you. So that's what I just got to keep telling myself as I'm trying to continue to do good and help people wherever they might be and meet them where they are.
Mm-hmm. And I agree with that, because I've been telling you the same thing this last few weeks, right? With our messages. And another thing, you've shared about is the kind of fear of I'm so impressed that you've managed to record almost all your episodes. How many did you say? 97 of the 100?
Yeah, 97 of the 100, all in person.
Amazing. Just so, whereas I'm probably the other way around. I'd say maybe 10 of my 185, I think, episode.
Wow.
Maybe 10 of mine have been in person. So I'm coming at it the other way. But it's obviously totally different. But as you said, as your dad said, the content is what matters. And that's why people listen. So I have to say my audience has been pretty good with me in a few episodes where my mic hasn't connected and it's been taking my laptop microphone, or, there's been many other things where someone's collar has been rubbing on the mic or something like that, and people have forgiven it, like you said, with the content being good. So I'm sure everyone listening here will be kind to you moving forward, even though I'm sure they won't even notice the difference. So, it's very easy for us to look at other people and say, well, their challenges aren't as big as mine. So to hear to you and say, oh, boo-hoo, you don't get to record some episodes in person. That's so hard for you. But I'm struggling with this. But everyone listening has something that's not going to go to plan. They're in the thick of these feelings of, I feel this, as you said, or I feel stressed about that. What would be your advice to anyone who is working through something right now that they do feel is too big to overcome, or they can't see a way out? Because we all have our problems at different levels, but at the end of the day, we're all still trying to just find a way through.
Yeah, I think what's most important sometimes when you feel overwhelmed and it feels like there's no way out is to take a step back from whatever the issue is and give it some air, give it some time. Right now, so many of us are inside our homes and we're spending a lot of time thinking about the same stuff. And just because we might be diverting from what would otherwise be a normal routine, I mean, we have to settle into what is this new normal. And so for problems or situations that feel as though you just cannot move forward, the best piece of advice that I would offer is just to take a step back and breathe. And then, maybe it's a few hours later, maybe it's a day later, maybe it's a week later. Sometimes you just need time to process and remove a little bit of the emotion from it. I mean, there are so many things that we are all so passionate about. And sometimes that passion can blind us from a logical next step or a logical explanation as to how to move forward. So for me, sometimes by taking a step back, by letting that air in, I know that I'm giving myself the opportunity to come back at it at another time with a more clear mind and perhaps a new perspective.
So good. And then is that kind of what you have also found many of the guests that have achieved big things have also done? Or what other things have they done that have helped them through moments like this?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think taking a step back is a really great piece of advice that I've been offered before. Also, doing a lot more listening. I was actually going through some of the old episodes today, sending clips to past guests who wanted to celebrate with me on social media. And Michael Chernow, he's a restaurateur here in New York City and a creator as well. He mentioned something that I thought was really valuable, that in his biggest board meetings, when he's surrounded by the most people, that is often when he says the least. And for him, it's really smart to listen and respond instead of listen and react, because sometimes when we do things and we're very reactive, again, that emotion takes over and we're not as consciously making decisions with the good side of our brain sometimes, not to diss or disown the empowerment behind going on feeling and going based on gut. But sometimes, you do need to take that step back to make informed and influential, correct decisions.
Absolutely. And I think even within our own lives, I think all of us, I definitely am, are guilty of, someone is telling you something and you think you know what they're going to say. So you're already starting to plan your response before you even hear what they're saying. And then this is where the miscommunication happens, and you might respond straight after, but you haven't actually listened to what they've said. And then they feel like you're not listening because you're responding to the wrong part of the message. And I think we can all work on that a little bit better, even within our own lives, let alone just professionally and with big things that we want to do. I know I do that. I don't know, Emily, you may be a better listener than I am, but I definitely am guilty of kind of thinking about my response sometimes before someone's finished what they're saying. So I'm going to work on that too. Okay, so let's go into running. You have, had quite the journey with running, and we'll begin back with when your fitness journey began. As many of my listeners will be inspired to hear that you lost more than 70 pounds during your fitness journey. So tell us about the moment that, I guess this was a hurdle moment in itself, where you decided, I have to make a change to my life.
Of course. So I grew up in Connecticut and went to school at the University of Connecticut. And growing up, I grew up in a big Italian family, a lot of love, and also a lot of food. I weight cycled a good portion of my teen years. I remember being pretty slender and teaching, hip hop dance at a summer camp. And then between ages 17 and 18, just kind of ballooning in my weight and getting to campus my freshman year and being pretty uncomfortable with where I was at and a little ashamed, to be honest, about my body. And I was working on either a term paper or a final exam my spring semester of my freshman year in 2007, April. And I saw the scale under my bed and decided what time better than now to give it a tap. And so I got on the scale and saw 204 pounds staring back at me and just felt so beside myself that I had allowed myself to get to that point, that I hadn't taken more care, hadn't paid more attention, hadn't done something about it sooner. And so in that moment, I threw on an old high school sweatshirt and some cotton spandex leggings from Target and ran down the street past my dorm and probably lasted for about 5 seconds sprinting before I fell over in the grass. And I just looked up at the sky and knew that I needed to make a change. I needed to do something so that I could be happy and healthier. And so that for me happened in 2 different phases. The first phase of my weight loss journey was really learning how to eat better and control my portions and just be a little bit more responsible, not having banana chocolate chip ice cream at every meal, not having tater tots with every meal. And then the second part of it was really learning how to love running. I grew up never being a quote unquote great runner. I felt as though I wasn't good at it. And basically what happened was I got faced with the choice to either run and move regularly or not do anything. I, again, was back at that summer camp about halfway through my weight loss journey, working as a programming director. And I didn't have access to the Planet Fitness that I used to. I couldn't just hop on the elliptical and move my body for 45 minutes. And so I decided to get comfortable with the uncomfortable, and I decided to start running. I went out every day that summer for 14 minutes to run what I thought was a mile. And at the end of the summer, I realized that it was only a half mile, and it took me 14 minutes to run a half mile every single day. And what's interesting is that I look back on that moment and that I was still so happy because what I realized was that I learned to love running.
Thank you to Athletic Greens for sponsoring this episode of the Running For Real podcast and for supporting me. They don't just support me, actually. They do support my guest, Emily Abbate, as well. She is another massive Athletic Greens fan, and we are both so overjoyed with how much it has helped us in our lives. You heard Emily talking about how busy she is, how much she travels, how many things she has going on at the same time. So it works as kind of an insurance policy for her and myself. It doesn't matter what kind of busy you are. It doesn't matter what level you run at, how competitive you are. Athletic Greens is there for everyone, and it is so helpful. It is the all-in-one daily supplement with 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food source ingredients that work together to help the body absorb and synthesize these nutrients in a highly bioavailable form. It is the most comprehensive multivitamin or supplement that I have come across, and I have just noticed such a big difference since I've been taking it. I've been trusting it as my prenatal during my pregnancy, and I'm so thankful for having Athletic Greens by my side. You get the antioxidant equivalent of 12 servings of fruits and vegetables with your scoop every morning. You just shake it into water. It's the first thing I do when I wake up. I drink it down while I write in my journal. And then I know that even if my day hasn't been the best nutrition-wise, at least I have that in my system. And I'm just really thankful for that. So we know that the perfect diet doesn't exist, but this can help kind of fill in the gaps of what you are missing within your own diet. So if you want to check out Athletic Greens, you can get a 20-serving travel pack for free. So 20 servings of Athletic Greens for free by going to athleticgreens.com/Tina. That's athleticgreens.com/Tina. Give it a try, get those 20 servings free and get an additional month. And by the time you work through those, you will see what I am talking about. It is an amazing product. I genuinely can't imagine my life without it. And I think you'll feel the same way too. Oh, and one more thing, actually, my friends, I just should have mentioned this. This is available not just in the US, but many parts of Europe, including the UK, also in Canada. So don't waste your time thinking, oh, this is just for US listeners. This is also for you too.
I went out every day that summer for 14 minutes to run what I thought was a mile. And at the end of the summer, I realized that it was only a half mile, and it took me 14 minutes to run a half mile every single day. And what's interesting is that I look back on that moment and that I was still so happy because what I realized was that I learned to love running. And it was something that I never thought that I could do. And even if it wasn't a mile, that didn't matter. What mattered was that it became an activity that I looked forward to day in and day out. And now, since then, I mean, so much has changed. The miles have become 5Ks and half marathons and marathons. And now with 8 marathons down and London to go in October now, I couldn't be more grateful for the lessons that the sport has brought to me and the joy that the sport has brought to me over the last, 10 years or so.
Mm-hmm. And there's, I mean, I love that, but there's so many directions I could go with this that I'm not sure which one to go with, but okay. So let's go with you decided in this moment you needed to make a change. You started it with the scale and then ending up in the fitness industry, for your career as well. So many people who begin this weight loss journey, this is why I really hesitate to talk about weight loss on the podcast, but I feel comfortable enough with you that we can have a conversation about this. How did you, being in the fitness industry where all these articles and things you see are lose weight now, flat abs now, all these toxic things that can go through people's minds and set them, psychologically on a dangerous path. How do you feel like you managed to negotiate that? Or did you have any periods in your life where maybe you were restricting too much or you were struggling to kind of not get carried away with it? Because I can imagine being in that industry and surrounded by it every day, that would be pretty tough to stay strong enough not to, let it overtake your life.
I feel pretty grateful for how my journey happened. I lost all of the weight in college, which can obviously be a difficult time for a young woman regardless. But when I got into my career as a journalist, I didn't kickstart it in the wellness space. I actually started for about 3.5 years covering everything from healthy living to news and entertainment to home, food. There was a parenting lifestyle blog, so parenting topics as well. So for me, after the weight loss and moving to New York and getting really into, a little bit more into the running scene and just adjusting, I never felt like I was so immersed in the health and wellness space that I was tempted to break into unhealthy habits or maybe being super restrictive with what I was eating or over exercising. Mm-hmm. I will say, I think the only times in my life where I have probably had some bits of restriction or just trying to figure out how to navigate what an appropriate amount of exercise have been going through heartbreak and going through breakups. I think in those instances, so many of us lean into working out, and especially for me, into the run to kind of process the hard stuff. And so for me, at those times, I've been pretty level-headed and have sought out other hobbies or things to do that have nothing to do with working out, because otherwise I knew that I would just be there all day, every day, on the road and keeping to myself. And so I feel really fortunate. I also know that despite having a major weight loss under my belt, I am never going to be the kind of woman that has six-pack abs and thighs that don't touch. It's just not how I'm built. And I am so grateful for my body as it is. And so when I see this stuff that promotes, a six-pack and different diets and whatever, the trend of the day may be, I just understand that that's not meant for me. And I don't really think it's meant for most at all. And I also think that, my background as a journalist and having to create smart fact-based content helps me know when to stay away from things that are just written or created for clicks and how to decipher the real from the not so real.
That's so smart. I mean, you are so grounded for being able to do that. I honestly admire you for, I just don't know how I would be around that and not get kind of sucked in. And especially you saying how confident you are in kind of, accepting what your body is, what it looks like. This is what it's meant to be. I'm happy with it. And I haven't ended up down that restrictive path. For someone listening who is kind of going through this transformation, this journey, and maybe they're getting loads of compliments on losing weight, they're getting people saying how good they look. It's they can feel that it's starting to affect the way that they're viewing themselves, that if the scale goes up, that they feel bad about themselves, or if they read some article or see even the top of it, the headline for it, that they think, oh, I've got to read that because, I've got to go further. I'm not quite happy. How did you get to that point where you were at peace with your body? Like, was it just something that your parents ingrained in you, or was there somewhere you learned that lesson of I am who I am?
I think I got to a point where I understood that I was at a healthy point for me. I plateaued kind of in my weight loss, and I felt good and I felt like I had energy, and I just felt like I was at a realistic place. For me, I just feel really fortunate that it never got to that extreme level. And I also think that I have always been really realistic about what I'm capable of and how I'm feeling. And for me, it just never really got to that next level, that point where I would advise people to seek out some sort of other assistance.
Wow. There must be some strong morals in your family, or just maybe your parents that they ingrained in you that allowed you to kind of do that. I'm just so impressed with it, because I don't know, maybe I just something triggered me onto a wrong path, but I really do admire you for that. But I want to get back to running, as this is a running podcast after all. You mentioned earlier that you've done 8 marathons, and it is kind of a bit of a natural progression once people start running and get hooked by it, that they do end up in the marathon distance. But you got to run New York as your first marathon, which I'm sure is a pretty enviable one to start with. So tell us about, were you hooked on marathons before the New York Marathon? Was it something that you thought, this is really something I have to do? Or was it crossing the finish line of that race that you thought, wow, this is life-changing?
So it's funny. New York was actually my second. My first was in Hartford, Connecticut.
Okay.
But what I will say is that New York is the marathon that got me hooked on running marathons, without a doubt. I felt like when I ran the Hartford Marathon, it was a really emotional and unexpected experience. I mean, obviously you work yourself all you can for months and months, and you train and you get ready. And I almost think back to that marathon and I feel as if I was blacked out for it. I don't remember a lot about it. I just remember like having the goal that I was going to get to that finish line. And the next year in New York, when I ran through all of the boroughs and came over the Queensboro and had the crowd cheering when you go up First Avenue, and made my way towards Central Park and winded through the hills and got up and saw my parents in the grandstand. I remember so many things about that race because it was literally life-changing. And it's a day that I reflect on as probably one of the best of my life. And so for me, that marathon that day, it changed everything for me. It made me a better person, and it made running a staple and concreted it in my life forever, without a doubt.
Oh, so cool. And I love hearing that. And it's, pretty typical for runners to say that. And for non-runners, it's hard to wrap your brains around how much it can, make a difference in someone's life like that. But it really does. And so nice to hear that about you. And just curious, within the fitness world, the health world, these people that you record podcasts with, when you would interact with people, or I guess you still interact with people as a freelancer, what do people think of running? Do they kind of see it as like the nerdy sport that, you should be doing these high intensity workouts? Or what is the perspective? You can give us the inside view here.
Yeah, I think what's great about running right now is that it is so accessible to so many different people. You don't need to be going out and running a marathon to be a runner. You can run for minutes at a time. You can run for hours at a time. You can run fast, quote unquote. You can run slow, quote unquote. But whatever it is that you want to do, however you interpret running, that still makes you a runner. And so I think more than ever right now, there is so much beauty around the acceptance in the running community for runners of all types and paces and sizes and backgrounds. And how beautiful is that we all have the opportunity to join in together on this one sport that makes us feel like our truest versions of ourselves.
And have you taken the time to figure out your why within running? Is that it?
I think my why personally for running is just to feel like me. When I sat down with Molly Seidel, she said something really interesting. She said, sometimes I feel like my brain doesn't fit inside of my body. And then I go for a run and it's as if it's back in there and all of the pieces start to make sense. And after a run, I feel like my truest, most authentic, best self. And for me, the same thing holds true. And especially getting up and out first thing in the morning, for me, that run, it makes me feel like I am prepared to handle whatever comes my way in the hardest of days, on the good days, on the bad days. Running makes me feel just that I can. And that's just so special.
I love that. So would you say that you've applied a lot of the lessons you've learned as a runner to other parts of your life, maybe things that you thought you couldn't do?
Oh, definitely. I mean, for me, especially in times of challenge like the ones that I'm dealing with now, I feel as though running has taught me that there always is a way through. We can always show up to challenge. And someone commented on my Instagram last night, and I thought it was so special. My friends at Old Man Run Club, a club here in New York City, they said right now we're all at the bottom of this hill. And what we've learned as runners is that there's only one way, and that way is to move forward. And sometimes it might happen slowly, but what will happen at the end of this is once we make it up the hill, we'll all be there to celebrate and jog down together. And I thought that was so profound and just so special and so true and applicable to what's happening now.
That's so true. Oh, I love that. That is really cool to think about. And it is true. That is the point we are in. Hopefully by the time this comes out, we're about halfway up the hill, but or maybe even near the top. But for now, we are just taking it day by day. Now, I don't know, again, how we're going to look in a few weeks, months, but I remember a while ago, you put a picture up of you saying that I can't remember if it was loved or enjoyed or some kind of very positive word, which I did not associate with treadmill running. You said you loved it. And I said, no, like you're crazy, basically. But you've said that you enjoy it. And I know many listeners fall into the category with me of, not so much enjoying it. Although, Emily, I don't know if you saw me say this a few months ago, but while I've been pregnant, I was running on the treadmill once or twice a week, doing a workout, doing some intervals. And I have to say, I was actually enjoying it. And so I did think of you during that time. I thought, actually, she's right. Like this is enjoyable. And I like that I could control the environment more than I could outside. So for someone who is in the category that I'd been in for the last 31 years of my life, what would you tell people to make treadmill running more tolerable, especially if at this point when this comes out, people maybe treadmill running could well be the only option that we have if things get worse?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the treadmill has been a really fun tool to use to find my fast. I have learned to pick up the pace outside, but when you've got that belt moving under you, there really is no option but to kick it into high gear sometimes. And so for me, I've actually loved doing classic track workouts on the tread to really see how I can push my body. And I think that is probably my biggest takeaway from the last few years, especially I trained for the 2018 Boston Marathon. Obviously over the winter, it was freezing. I did a lot of tread work inside. And that was the first time that I really took to the tread to try, something new. And so for me, the best piece of advice that I would offer to someone who wants to learn how to love the treadmill is to mix things up. Getting on there and running for 12 miles at the same pace isn't really enjoyable for almost anyone. But if you get up there and you mix things up and you try to play with things like your pace or your incline and do different intervals, that's when the treadmill becomes a really fun training tool. And that's why I have taken to it.
Friends, you've probably heard me saying over the past few months that I am currently taking 3 months off from working while I enjoy time with my new baby. Now, please make sure I stick to this. If you see me doing things work online, that is time for you to get in touch with me, say, hey, what are you doing online? Now, I will let you know my assistant, Amber, is going to be taking over some things for me. Some things I have prepared ahead of time. But if you notice that it seems to be very real time, please let me know, because I promised myself I would take 3 months off and I need to be able to stick to that. Now, that being said, there is one thing that I'm continuing to do during this time. Not these podcasts. These podcasts were recorded ahead of time. You've got these interviews to enjoy. There will not be a break in episodes during this time. And I'm really thankful for guest host Sarah Crouch for taking over some of those. But the one thing that I am going to be doing during this time is writing my email newsletters on a Monday. Now, there's over 7,000 of you already signed up for these emails. I know you love them. I love seeing your replies come in every week. And you can sign up at tinamuir.com/subscriber. That's tinamuir.com/subscriber. All it is kind of an update, something I'm thinking about for the week, something that I'm appreciating. And it really makes you think. I love that I have the ability to get into people's heads and really make a difference. And then at the bottom, I give some things I'm enjoying, some updates, just some things that you may have missed throughout the week that I would have shared. And it's just something that's very kind of friend to friend. It just feels like I'm emailing you just to kind of let you know my updates. And I would love for you to be a part of the 7,000 other runners who are on this list. You can go to tinamuir.com/subscriber. That's tinamuir.com/subscriber to sign up. And I will see you every Monday.
Getting on there and running for 12 miles at the same pace isn't really enjoyable for almost anyone. But if you get up there and you mix things up and you try to play with things like your pace or your incline and do different intervals, that's when the treadmill becomes a really fun training tool. And that's why I have taken to it.
So can you give us an example of, say, take that 12-mile run? What would be an example of what you would break it down into?
For sure. So I don't know if I would necessarily say, okay, let's go do 12 miles of intervals on the tread. Although I have definitely had to lean into the tread when I've been traveling to do some long runs, unfortunately, just because of humidity or conditions or not knowing the area. But when it comes to a traditional kind of interval workout that I would do, it could be something as simple as 16 by 400, and you're resting 90 seconds in between each 400, which equals, of course, that 0.25 on the tread. And so you're
jog
just
during that time, like slow the speed down, or like jump onto the sides?
Yeah, I mean, I would never necessarily suggest jumping onto the sides for anyone, but I would say that you could either jog or you could bring it down to a walk, or you could literally turn the tread to, the slowest walk possible and completely recover for those 90 seconds before getting back into the swing of things. It really does depend on what maybe your current goals are with your training or where you're going with that. I know some days during a marathon cycle, if I have a workout like 8 by 400, the rest could be a jogging or a light running rest. Whereas if I'm not training for anything specific and I'm just really working on, that quick speed, quick hit, fast twitch muscle fiber situation, then I could be doing that same 8 by 400, but then just completely resting during the off 90 seconds. And I get a lot of questions in my DMs over on Instagram asking about how to translate these track workouts into the tread. And it isn't necessarily the easiest thing, but it's definitely not impossible. I think you just need to be willing to do some quick math. I will literally reach for my phone and write things down like a timestamp or what distance the tread was on when I got to part A or part B of the workout, just so I can keep tabs on things. And for me, it took some getting used to, but it still now is something that I look forward to, just being able to pick up the pace. And it's something, man, I'd give anything to do right now.
Yeah, for sure. And I would also add that for anyone who doesn't want to add that complication, you can always do it in minutes. I mean, obviously it's not going to be 100% exact, but if you know that, or if you want to do 400 and test out what speed you think you would be able to keep up, and then just kind of do it, a rough estimate, like it could be, a 2 minute, you could do 2 minutes, you could do 3 minutes, you could do 2.5, but something that is a bit easier for your brain to wrap around. And then you could keep it as, like a 90-second rest, just to make the numbers nice and easy. So if you don't want to be dealing with the math, you can, because I hate math, so I'm always looking for ways out of math. You can also just use minutes. So just wanted to add that in there. Okay, so another thing you've mentioned that you use the treadmill quite a lot for traveling, and we've already said that you were going to go, you've done a lot of in-person interviews, which obviously points to lots of traveling. Now, there's not really much traveling going on right now, but how have you handled not traveling much? Have you missed it? Have you appreciated being still and not having to constantly pack up your bag? Like, how have you been handling that aspect of your life?
I mean, I definitely miss traveling. It's interesting, to have such an extreme difference between not traveling so much and not really moving that much at all. For me, I am trying to find the silver lining like a lot of people, and taking a step back and looking at the things that maybe I wanted to work on but haven't had the time. The reality is, though, that, the travel definitely keeps me busy, but I have been a freelancer for quite some time. So I've had to get used to this lifestyle of, making the time and working on the weekends and doing all of these things. So yes, like the difference now for me is that I'm doing it all from my apartment, but my day to day in terms of how I'm handling my workload isn't shifting all that much. But it is nice to have some time here to organize. And it's really funny now that by the end of the day, every day, I'm like tidying things up around my apartment as if I'm my mother, I feel like.
Yeah, I guess time in quarantine is going to make us all kind of bring out some of the things that our parents may have done that we didn't realize we were doing, but we're seeing ourselves do them all the time, and we're realizing that we really are just turning into our parents. So it probably is quite an insightful time for many of us. And actually, speaking of that, I did see you post at some point about kind of finding yourself, being okay with yourself and with space to think. Now, you, me, most people listening are very good at filling up our days with things, with tasks, with meetings, with gotta do this, gotta do that. But this time has really opened up some space for all of us to really be alone with our thoughts. And it can be quite scary because you now have to deal with these things, these insecurities that you may have had, that before you were so busy that you could stuff them away and ignore them. But tell us about what that process has been like for you, and then how you've been finding peace with being alone with those thoughts that maybe aren't as encouraging and positive as you would like them to be.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's interesting. I, 2 years ago, took a really impactful trip to Italy, and I went by myself, and I expected to get to Italy and feel really upset that I was taking such an awesome trip solo. But what I found when I was there was just how much opportunity and beauty there is when you can be by yourself and really appreciate that time. And so it's funny when you think about how things are unfolding in the series of events, is that I don't know if I'd be navigating this time as positively if I hadn't had that opportunity in 2018 to go over there. And so for me, I mean, I'm navigating this time alone. I mean, I spend so much time alone as it is, and I always have. And so the shift now, obviously, is that it's not as easy to go out and meet up with a friend and see my parents. And those are all things that I certainly will maybe think a little bit differently of when I get the opportunity to do them again. But what I will say is that it's really special that we have kind of this gift of time to learn how to be okay just being by ourselves. And for me, that looks like a lot of things. It looks like still keeping some sort of regular schedule. It looks like journaling every day and trying not to go to bed without doing that. It means taking the time to do meditation and move in different ways. It means writing to-do lists and keeping myself accountable and having conversations with people that mean something to me. And so for me, this time alone, it's like a lot of time to do all of this self-development work, but it's also a time for me to celebrate that I have come so far and feeling good on my own. And I wrote in that post that you were referencing that I definitely went through a period that I didn't feel like it was as easy, right? I didn't feel as if being alone was something to be celebrated, but what I learned was that there's nothing wrong to do things by yourself. You're not doing anything wrong if you can't find someone to go on a run or have dinner with. What it is an opportunity for you to really look within and listen to yourself and enjoy that time with just you, because there's only one you. And if you don't take the time to embrace who it is you are, there's only so much time that we have, and there's no time like the present.
That is so good and such good advice. I mean, for everyone really, but especially as you said, at times where you are alone and it's so easy to reach for, okay, I've got to fill my time with someone else. Let me see, like you said, who's around for dinner, or I need someone to give me, I don't know, some space away from my own thoughts. But as you said, this is such a good time to work on that. And for someone who's thinking, I don't like myself, I don't want to be on my own with myself, I don't want to allow those thoughts in, what would you say to that person?
I think it's hard. It's never easy to confront yourself with the truths that you might not be ready to accept, but being honest and being open and saying or writing things down is the first step to accepting and maybe, if you want to, changing. So if you are someone who is scared of spending time alone, if you feel uneasy about being in solitude, then it's time to open up about getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. If you don't put yourself in these situations, then you're going to never know how you would act if the opportunity presents itself. And so the best thing you can do is start to be honest and open with yourself. And if it doesn't feel good, know that that's okay. There are a lot of people that struggle with spending time alone. And so start to explore what it feels like, write things down, look back on your words. And again, be honest, because the last thing that you need is to lie to yourself about what's really happening. There's no way to make progress if you're not admitting those realities.
So true. And I want to add in that this is not just applying to people who are single and in a place where they are having to do things on their own. This applies to everyone. I mean, all of us. I mean, it may seem like, well, I've got, a spouse or I've got a sister that I live with or whatever it is. I don't need to deal with that. But this is all of us. We all need to work through the feelings and the being okay with ourselves, because at the end of the day, as you said, there's only one you. So if you aren't comfortable with that person, somewhere down the road, it may be 6 months from now, like something like this comes up, or it may be when you're 75 and suddenly on your own, who knows? But the longer you let it go, the harder it's going to be. So why not use this opportunity we have right now to turn it around?
Right.
Okay, so to wrap up here, we've talked about a lot of things in this episode. Some of them have been running related, some of them haven't been. But just when it comes to running and some of your hopes and dreams for the future, what are some of the things on your list? You mentioned the marathon majors, so that's obviously a big one. But do you have any other things that maybe go beyond marathons or time goals or anything that you've thought about that you would like to achieve at some point?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still trying to crack the sub 6 minute mile. I am so thankful for what's happened for me in the marathon. I ran a 3:28:08 marathon in Chicago last year, and that was kind of something that was beyond my wildest dreams. Yeah. So when it comes to cracking that some more, I mean, I feel great about the marathon, but I'd love to get that sub 6 minute mile under my belt. It's so close, I can taste it.
And what are some opportunity races? I mean, in New York, you do have some, but what are some of the races that could be a possibility that you could test it out?
Yeah. For me, there's the Brooklyn Mile and there's also the Fifth Avenue Mile. I really, really like the Brooklyn Mile. So I'd love to do it there this year.
Okay. Well, we'll be behind you if you do that, and looking forward to hearing when it happens. All right. So Emily, where can people find out more about you? We'll be putting lots of links in the show notes, but for people who want to go follow you elsewhere, where else can they go?
For sure. Head on over to Instagram. You can find me there at Emily Abbate. That's ABBATE. And also, of course, always at Hurdle Podcast. And then when it comes to where else you can find me, wherever you are listening to Tina, you can also find Hurdle in the iTunes store, on Stitcher, on Overcast, you name it, and Google Play. So check out Hurdle, rate, review, subscribe, and I hope to see you guys on the feed sometime soon.
I'm sure you will find them. And what was I going to say to you a second ago about your social media? Well, I definitely. Oh no, I know what I was going to ask you. So, if people were going to go to the podcast, give them 3 episodes to start with, because it is so overwhelming. I don't know if you've had this experience when you go to a podcast and there's 100 plus. It's just you don't know where to begin. So, give people 3.
Of course. So I would say definitely start with episode 1 so you can hear a little bit more about my backstory, my credentials, my history, more with running and, of course, with weight loss, and then in my career. When it comes to some of my favorite guest episodes to date. I've got to give a shout out to episode number 75, Allie Love. She is an instructor at Peloton and the founder of Love Squad. Also, my favorite. I just have such a soft spot for my conversation that I had with Andy Prudicombe. That is reissued as episode 88. And lastly, one that I think will resonate with a ton of you is my Chicago Marathon recap from October 16th, 2019. It is one that I hear from people all the time. They can really relate to. So I definitely think you should give that one a listen.
Great. Thank you so much. And I just want to add for anyone listening, that one thing that Emily does, which I know you guys all love, is that she quite often does these mini episodes. Do you have a name for them?
Yeah, they're mostly called hurdle moments, although I'm trying something new now with these 5-Minute Fridays.
Okay. All right. So then, you get these little mini snippets of where Emily's thinking about something, and they are inspiring and they do make you think and want to make a change. And I absolutely love when those come out. So when you see those, when you subscribe, make sure you go listen to those too, because, Emily is just such a special person in this world, and we should definitely be making the most of her. So thank you so much for coming on the show today, for sharing your heart with us and letting us get to know you. We really appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me, Tina. I really appreciate it.
My friends, if you have a minute and you could leave a review on your favorite podcast player, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Spotify, or whatever else podcast player you use to listen to this podcast, or if you would subscribe to this podcast, you will help me get out in front of new runners to make our tribe even bigger and even better. It might not seem like you as one person can make a difference, but really it helps a lot. And it shows me you appreciate the hard work I put in for those. Thank you so much. Thank you to Emily for being vulnerable with us, for sharing your story with us, and just kind of letting us get to know you. I hope you will enjoy the Hurdle podcast. As I mentioned, there are not just great interviews in there, but there are also these kind of powerful little mini episodes where Emily feels like Emily is talking directly into your ears. So I think you're really going to enjoy getting to know her. Now, you can find links to everything we talked about today in the show notes at tinamuir.com/episode 187. If this is your first episode, I hope you have enjoyed this today and you will continue to check out next week's episode. I just want to take another moment to thank Tracksmith and Athletic Greens for sponsoring this episode. Please go check them out in the show notes and consider purchasing their products. By you purchasing a product of a sponsor of mine, it really shows a lot of support to me. It shows you appreciate all that I do. And I'm so thankful to all of you who have purchased products because I have recommended them. Hopefully by now, I really pride myself. I filter out a lot of companies because I don't feel good about them. And I'm excited to work with the ones that I do. So I hope you believe me that I really do pick who I work with very, very carefully. And so you supporting them means a lot to me. Okay, so next week we're going to be, next week is a very exciting episode because I have my future guest host coming on the show. Sarah Crouch will be back on the show. We're going to be talking about what she's done since 2019. I think she came on in January or February 2019. A lot has changed in her life. A lot of negatives, a lot of bad things happened, but she managed to, get through them. She managed to keep up her infectious, bright attitude towards life. And I think you're going to love her if you have not already met her before. And then after that episode, I will be passing over some of the reins to her while I am on maternity leave. She will be hosting 4 future episodes. So this will be a really good opportunity to get to know her if you do not already. So you can check that one out next Friday. But in the meantime, my friends, I hope you have a wonderful week and I'll see you then.
Thanks for listening to the Running for Real podcast. Be sure to check out tinamuir.com for show notes and even more helpful running information.